I feel cheated because Sansa's aunt basically spent the better half of a minute, if not a whole minute, explaining how once you actually toss someone into the pit, how it's fascinating seeing what actually happens to their bodies once they actually hit the rocks. She doesn't even know how far down it goes. Least of all from personal experience, although that changed this episode. But yeah, I feel cheated because they spent a solid minute getting me actually kind of warmed up to the idea of seeing someone tossed into that pit, which I admit I haven't really had much interest in throughout the rest of the series. But you warmed me up to the idea, and then once we actually saw her get pushed in, we didn't see what happened to the body. I mean, yeah, I know she's dead, and I guess narratively you don't really need anything more than that. But the sadistic curiosity in me, um, that was fueled by her little speech, actually had me feeling kind of cheated. I mean, I feel like they were gearing me up for a joke, then bailed out halfway through the punchline. I don't know. It's just a little nitpick that I had. Maybe I'm just really sick. but yeah, I cannot be the only one just a little perplexed, at least initially, when they cut away before actually seeing her hit the ground. Maybe it was for budgetary limitations. Maybe it's because they didn't really want to have to go through the trouble of showing you what happens. I don't know. But overall, this was a pretty interesting episode, and basically, whenever I watch one of these things, I try to find a recurring theme that ties the episode together. Because if you don't have a recurring theme, you basically end up with a mess. But the recurring theme this time around was basically misconception. How someone could get the wrong idea of something or someone just based on looks, or how something appears. And that was the cause of a lot of different interesting scenes this episode. The most intriguing of which, I sound like a broken record by saying this, but Tyrion again had the most interesting plot this time around, because we are again wondering what's going to happen to him. And you know what? For a while there, things were not exactly looking up for the guy, because he asked his brother to, because as we saw last episode, he demanded a trial by combat. Now, his brother would fight for him, except there is absolutely no way he could beat the champion for the prosecutor, their sister. I mean, Lena Headey's character has enlisted the help of her daddy's right hand man, the Mountain, who is the older brother of the Hound. Now, we haven't exactly seen a lot of this guy throughout the series, and I actually think he may have been recast one or two times. I don't know, but he has little to no personality. All we know is that he is big and he likes to kill. He likes to kill, and he works for Charles Dance. And the fact that they're busting him out as the champion against Tyrion, or whoever Tyrion picks, does not bode well, since he's apparently one of the most deadly people in the world, at least in terms of a physical fight. So initially Tyrion asks Jaime to fight for him, and again, Jaime would fight for his little brother. He loves his little brother, but there is absolutely no way he could beat the Mountain. There's no way. At least not with his left hand. And as we all know, he recently became left-handed. I mean, even during his practice sessions with Bronn, he can't beat the Mountain. The Mountain is entirely out of his league. He's out of the league of a lot of potential combatants. So things don't bode well. So Jaime's out, and Tyrion asks Bronn, who finally comes to see him, Jerome Flynn's character, and even Bronn turns his back because because not only is he in a pretty good position financially at the moment, financially and in terms of his status right now, courtesy of Lena Headey's little bribery, but also he's not even sure he can beat the Mountain, because basically what his perfectly reasonable argument is even if he actually did succeed in bringing down the Mountain, there's no guarantee that he would really get anything out of it, because Tyrion is completely broke, and all he really has to go on is, well, my wife is the heir to Winterfell. He doesn't even know where his wife is. He doesn't even know where Sansa is. And he says, I may be able to pay you back one day, and you'll have my gratitude, and I have a bit of gold. And Bronn rightly says, well, doesn't exactly sound promising. Your sister made a much more confident investment. So there's that, and there's also the fact that despite the fact that he genuinely views Tyrion as a friend, he just does not think he can beat the Mountain. Especially not after Tyrion has never risked his life to save Bronn. Bronn has always been the one to do the heavy lifting, and until then, that's worked out fine. But this scene, they were treading on some thin ice in terms of the character of Bronn, because you could have easily just rendered all of his scenes with Tyrion and all of his development up to this point completely void if you had just said, well, I'm completely abandoning you now that it suits my own goals, because they've been developing this friendship basically throughout the series. And to suddenly say, no, I'm not going to fight for you again, it could have done a number on his character, and they do soften the blow quite a bit. A lot more than I probably could have if I were writing this. But that's not really saying a whole lot. So they actually gave Bronn some pretty reasonable arguments as to why he won't fight for Tyrion again. I mean, he says, well, I might be able to take the Mountain in theory, but if I made one mistake, then he would slice me in two. So, yeah, not exactly bad odds, and I can't really say I necessarily blame Bronn for cashing in his chips and going home, so to speak. I mean, he's taking his money and he's running. He's not willing to gamble anymore when it comes to Tyrion's life and defending Tyrion. Especially not when the odds are not exactly in his favor. So Bronn is out, and the twist comes when Oberyn, the prince, the Arabian-looking prince guy, he actually comes to Tyrion and says, I will fight for you. And he proceeds to tell a story about how he had basically, as a child, he had been basically kind of disappointed because when Tyrion was born, he was labeled as this monster who had inadvertently killed his mother when he was born. Like he had a tail, he had a red eye, he had claws, and Oberyn had come to visit, and he saw this baby, and he basically said, "Well, this wasn't a monster. This was just a baby that looked kind of different." So that concept of simply judging someone by appearances, because really Lena Headey's character has no reason, or had no logical reason to hate Tyrion up to this point, other than the fact that he was deformed and it looked like his mother had died during childbirth. So again, just judging the whole scenario and the person by how they appeared to be. It all comes back to that central theme I was talking about, and also there comes a point when Arya actually stitches up the Hound, and she hears how he was basically oppressed by his brother, and throughout the entire series, she has basically wanted to kill this guy. She has wanted nothing more than to see him crossed off of her list, so to speak. So to actually hear that he was a very helpless victim as a kid. Not only do I think it deepens their kind of dare I say friendship, acquaintanceship, brother in arms sort of thing, but I also think it really furthers her as a character, at least in the sense that I don't really think she'll be judging as many people based on first impressions or how they look from now on. I mean, she judged the Hound right away. I mean, not only did she look at him and go, "Wow, you're repulsive, dude," but she looked at his deeds that he performed in the name of the king, and she just all of a sudden decided, I hate you now, I have to kill you. So it really showed not only how naive she was at the beginning, but also how far she's come. And again, I don't really think she'll be, I mean, if this scene is any indication, I don't really think she'll be treating the Hound as harshly, or quite as harshly as she's been wont to do. And the final scene I picked up that basically relied on that theme was the scene where Sansa's aunt actually tries to kill her niece. Sansa lives through attempted murder by her aunt because Littlefinger, the Aidan Gillen character, he had done a little smooch. He had kissed Sansa, and despite it being without her consent, Sansa's aunt basically said, "You were trying to steal my new husband. I always loved Littlefinger, blah, 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 blah." So she completely took it the wrong way. Because Sansa, I don't really think Sansa admires or loves Littlefinger. I know she doesn't love Littlefinger. If anything, she's become very wary and even slightly respectful of how sly he is. And you have to wonder, was this his plan all along? Did he always plan to kill Sansa's aunt and subsequently inherit the throne, the throne and her lands? I wouldn't put it past him. I mean, he seems to have every step of the way laid out this season. I mean, from murdering the king to smuggling Sansa out of there. So this character is becoming more interesting, I find. I mean, I didn't really get the appeal behind his character until recently, because he always seemed to be getting duped. He always seemed to be getting pushed down by Ned Stark, or trying to, or trying to get the better of Tyrion, and he was always being outsmarted by Tyrion. And he even helped. He even deceived Ned Stark, and seemingly sided with Joffrey in that little revolt. So up until this point, I haven't really cared about the character of Littlefinger, but he's becoming a lot more interesting the more I watch him, as is Prince Oberyn. So I can't really say the performances are any better, although all the performances still remain top notch. Because Peter Dinklage is great. I think Pedro Pascal is the guy who plays Oberyn is great. I liked the scenes between Brienne and Tyrion's ex-squire. Nikolai Coster-Waldau is great. I mean, all of these guys still do a good job. And Rory McCann, the Michael from Hot Fuzz. I'm sorry, ever since I've seen Hot Fuzz, I just keep imagining the Hound to say, "Yarp." I don't know, I'm sorry, that's immature of me. At least I'm not calling him Michael, because God knows that's easier to remember than the Hound. I don't know. But he's still very good, and from watching Hot Fuzz, you wouldn't really peg him as this dramatic actor, or at least any actor with any dramatic capability. Again, first impressions. I mean, Hot Fuzz was the only thing I had seen him in until I watched this show. So to see him play a role that's such a departure from his role in Hot Fuzz actually actually not only speaks for the writing of this show, really giving him some very juicy material to work with, but also you have taken this guy who has essentially been a thug since season one, and you have given him real depth, and you have made him you are in the process of making him one of the more interesting characters on the show. Now, granted, a lot of the interesting characters have been killed off, so I don't really know how much longer he has to live. But I don't know. Here's hoping they actually evolve the relationship between him and Arya, because up to this point, I have to admit, it has been entertaining watching them basically snipe at each other, and him basically teach her the harshness of the world. But I think they have to really get some new material in there, and this episode seems to have paved the way for that. And speaking of character relationships, the dynamic between Brienne and Tyrion's squire, I'm sorry, I don't know his name. I'm liking that more and more. I mean, at first I said to myself, these characters I don't really think I ever demanded seeing these two characters together. I mean, it just seemed very random. And I was interested to see where they went, and so far, I like what I'm seeing. They are two very different characters, but they each bring something unique to the table. I mean, the squire brings his knowledge of the lands and his I don't want to say wits, but he is essentially the brains of the outfit, and he does have useful information on how do they find their target, how do they find Sansa. So seeing that each of these guys has something useful to bring to the table in their little quest does give me new confidence in saying, this could work. So overall, yeah, this was an interesting episode. It had a few decent twists. I'm pretty sad that there's not going to be a new episode for 2 weeks, but what can you do? And hey, at least they left. They're going on hiatus on a high note. So yeah, that's about all I got. And I can safely say that this episode lives up to their usual high standards.